The following is a Papi Chulo Radio original program. The views and opinions expressed in the commentaries and/or interviews in the following program are solely those of the individuals and are not views of Papi Chulo Radio, its parent, affiliate, or subsidiary companies.
Is everybody ready for the final run?
All set.
Let's do this.
Countdown to the very final Central City Citizen. In 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the final episode of the Central City Citizen, a PapiChuloRadio.com original series. Papi Chulo Radio, pop culture on demand. Today is Thursday, May 25th, 2023, and I am your host, Professor X. During this podcast, we'll be having an in-depth discussion on the CW's The Flash. For one last time, please welcome my co-host, Dimitri Jasinger.
What's good, Central City?
And Jeffrey Ruse.
Hey, Central City.
Let's jump into our discussion of Season 9, Episode 13, which was titled A New World Part 4 and aired May 24th, 2023. Here's the official synopsis of the episode. For Barry Allen, it's the greatest challenge he and Team Flash, as well as friends old and new, will ever face as they come together to save not just Central City, but everything one last time. Didn't give away a lot, but you wouldn't want them to give away too much before the last episode. And that episode begins with voiceover. Voiceover is Barry talking about in a way that seems vaguely reminiscent of something we've heard before. Meanwhile, Team Flash in 2023 is being filled in by Cecile that Eddie Thawne is the new avatar of the Negative Speed Force, and that the Negative Speed Force has been attacking over the past 3 episodes to charge itself up for a final confrontation. Barry contacts them on comms as he's back in the present somehow, even though at the end of last episode he was trapped in the future, but hey, I guess he got better. He's on his way to the hospital and tells them the battle has already begun. Existence itself is in danger. So I mentioned the idea that we had a bit of a callback to that first episode of the first season, really, with Barry doing a "Do you believe in the impossible" voiceover. Dimitri, you weren't here last time to talk about the last episode, but given where things stood at the end of the last episode, Barry was stuck in the future. Eddie was, going to go claim his destiny. How'd you like how the episode got going?
It was a nice kind of full circle moment. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves there, but I was hoping he was going to exactly match the voiceover at the start of episode 1 when he started talking to Nora, but we can get to that later. Overall, it did seem like a way to, bookend the series. Starts with the voiceover. Barry's like, "Do you believe in the impossible?" I feel like voiceovers for superhero films, TV shows are like a tried and true way to sort of get the audience on your side early. So I was fine with it.
I could be wrong, but I think that was the exact voiceover from the first episode. Grant Gustin sounded much younger than he does now.
No, because I did read something where he was talking about recording it.
Oh, okay.
We get a montage with Zoom and Godspeed being drawn in from wherever they were after their deaths in previous season to the Negative Speed Force manifestation of the West House. They have no idea why they're there. Reverse Flash is also there, Eobard Thawne with Harrison Wells' face, and he tells them they're in the Negative Speed Force. Savitar also shows up. Then Eddie explains that he's the one who brought them there. He points out that they all died in their attempts to defeat the Flash. None of them were powerful enough or fast enough to pull it off, but together, combined, they can do it. Eddie then accepts and embraces the blue crystal and becomes Cobalt Blue and offers the others enough speed to kill the Flash. So all our baddies are here, and it looks like it's once again going to be a speedster fest. Jeff, how'd you like the reintroduction of these various nemesis from seasons gone by?
I enjoyed it, actually. It was nice to see them. Like, I didn't mind it just because it's the series finale. So if it's going to be Speedster Palooza, might as well pluck them out right before they die, pluck them out of time, I should say, right before they die and bring them all together. I believe this is the scene in which Grant Gustin has famously said in interviews that he had caught COVID and he was going to do a scene with Teddy Sears as Zoom. I think we were going to see the fragment Barry, the sort of like demented looking Barry that becomes Savitar. I think we were going to see him in his human form in this scene, but because he caught COVID and he couldn't do the scene, they did the whole CGI Savitar at that moment.
Oh, an interesting idea.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that made sense as far as a Barry Allen character with Teddy Sears, outside of like the big group fight, and I don't even think Teddy Sears was there for that. You know what I'm saying? Because he had the mask on and that sort of thing. But yeah, it was really cool. Now that I'm thinking about it, he also did a voiceover at the end. Maybe it was the end one that he recorded.
Oh, could very well have been. Worth listening to. I would be surprised, though. I would think that, the whole point of it would be to use the same one at the beginning and the end, but just the realization, which we're not going to talk about because we're not Dimitri, about what he was actually doing. At the hospital, Barry returns and Iris is happy to see him. Go figure, but she hasn't given birth just yet, so he still has time.
Are you saying go figure that she was happy to see him?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's sort of an obvious thing, right?
Okay, yes.
Go figure. And we continue. Barry starts to tell her about Eddie, but he's interrupted when Eddie shows up with flowers and introduces himself as Cobalt Blue. Obviously, as we expected after last episode, he wants to kill Barry so he can have a timeline where he's the hero and have the life that he feels was taken from him. But Iris and Barry know that isn't what the negative Speed Force is up to. It's merely using Eddie. Iris tells Barry to run, Barry, run. Barry and Eddie race off, and they joust and fight. Eddie manages to get the upper hand and nearly kills Barry before Nora shows up with the rest of Team Flash to fight as well. But Eddie summons his own help, his Legion of Zoom. What did you think, Dimitri, of the hospital scene with Barry and Iris, and then Cobalt Blue showing up, and the start of the fight? We're going to get into more of the fight as we go along, because that was a big part of the episode.
Yeah, it was a little strange, I guess. It seemed like Cobalt Blue was gonna attack Iris. He did say the last time he met Iris that, you're gonna regret this, you and everybody you love. So I was expecting him to try and attack Iris, or somehow induce a miscarriage or something. And it did seem that, despite the fact that he'd clearly gotten the jump on those two, he meant them no harm, which was interesting given, he had already assembled this army to attack Barry. So it seemed a little contrived. It seemed like the whole scene was there just so Iris could say, run, Barry, run one last time. But, it's the finale. We'll give him that.
I honestly thought when she said, I've got 3 words, Barry, I thought she was going to say kick his ass. I honestly was not thinking run, Barry, run. But I liked it. I thought Rick Cosnett played the character very well, showing up with roses, sort of looking around for a place to put them in water and putting them in the drinking water because he couldn't find anything else, and then playing with the stuffed animal. Sort of playing, a slightly unhinged version of Eddie, not full evil, but he felt, if anything, more menacing to me than, in last episode when we saw him, screaming and chewing up the scenery a bit more. So I like his air of quiet menace. I think because it showed a sense of confidence on his part that, he knew he had all the pieces in place, and he was confident enough to sort of show up and, wish her well before he kills her husband. So Barry calls for Delta maneuvers, and Team Flash faces off with the Legion of Zoom. Everyone goes racing off to deal with their evil speedsters individually. So let's deal with the first half. Savitar captures and stabs Nora, but it doesn't work because she's able to take his dagger and stab him instead by presumably vibrating at the same speed, which, by the way, I'd always wondered that too when other speedsters were threatening Barry with that. I'd always thought, well, why don't you just just vibrate at the same vibrational pattern. Maybe it's harder than I think. Anyway, Virtue faces off with Godspeed. How does Cecile have her super suit from the future? Who cares? It's the last episode. She defeats him with her nebulously defined powers. Reverse Flash confronts Chester at Star Labs and seems to kill him by doing an Emperor Palpatine. Allegra shows up and takes Thawne down. Just when things look grimmest for Chester, he wakes up. So far, Team Flash is doing pretty well, 3 for 3. Jeff, how did you like how this first series of fights went?
Where's my shotgun? That's another.
And were you surprised
Oh, yes.
that, because, it seemed like, Team Flash was doing really well for itself.
Yes. But as I was saying, where's my shotgun? There's another 3 words that Iris could have said.
Good point.
Yeah. Okay. This fight I thought was really well done visually. I mean, I can kind of nitpick about who paired up with whom, and I will in a moment. But before I sort of start talking about that, there is a moment in this fight that I absolutely loved. And it's when Barry gets tossed onto those 3 cars and they explode. That was cool. Spectacular. Like, if they saved up a whole bunch of money for just that, then kudos to them, because it was worth it 100%. That was probably one of the best stunt pieces that's not like a fight, just like a visual effects splendor type of scene or moment. I would say one of the best ones that I've seen in the series. It was just visually impressive for a television budget. I also did kind of enjoy the lightning swords, lightning sabers, lightsabers that we saw. Like, that was kind of neat for me. Like, we had seen them before, but they were like ginormous now. I guess some of them are kind of compensating for stuff. I don't know. But it was still visually interesting to look at. As far as how things split off. Okay, if we think about it logically from, there is a big bad and the big bad has minions. If you think about it that way, then it kind of sort of ish, if you don't really think about it, makes sense. Because at the end of the day, Barry has to fight Cobalt Blue. That is the big villain of the episode. So of course Barry is going to fight him versus Reverse Flash, because I'll be honest, when Reverse Flash just showed up out of nowhere and was like, I'm gonna kill you, like, I was like, what? Like, shouldn't you be after Barry? But anyway, Cecile having the costume that looks spectacular. I don't know how she did it, but the costume did still look spectacular in the future and in the present. Listen, I'm gonna say a word that y'all hated last season, so I'm just preparing you for it, in case you get triggered. They all leveled up. Big time in this episode. Like, everybody was at max level. They were all fighting the good fight the best way they could. What did Cecile do? I don't really know, but I was fine with it because she had a little catchphrase at the end. How did Godspeed know that her name was Virtue? I guess she's a big deal in the future because he is from the future.
Yeah, that's my headcanon, is that because he's from the future, he would know about her identity. And also, the argument could be made that the reason why she's wearing the costume is so they would recognize her from her future self.
Oh, yeah, look at me. I got my costume now. That works. Okay, who else did you ask? Nora. The Nora situation, I mean, what a grisly callback to the Savitar season. I mean, it was gnarly and intense. But she was very shui about it, which worked for me. I love that she just chopped off his little claw and stabbed him with it. It was spectacular. And if you think about it, she's actually stabbing a time-displaced fragment of her father, which, I mean, there's like a psychological breakdown of that you could probably get into in your own mind. And Chester and Allegra getting the longest kiss in Arrowverse history. I feel that was really interesting. I guess it was like I don't know what that, like an action hero movie moment, I guess. I don't know. Her leveling up was really good, though. I will give them props for that. I mean, they saved the budget for her, too, because she in essence destroyed all of Star Labs. The amount of damage that the city got in this episode, I was like, good grief, who's paying for this?
Zoom is confronted by the CCPD, but Chillblaine and Keone show up. Chillblaine, I guess, just as eye candy because he doesn't do diddly squat.
Right.
Keone catches Zoom's lightning, absorbs it, and fires it back at him because why not? Last episode. At Jitters, Eddie tries to take hostages, but Jay Garrick shows up to aid Barry, stealing Eddie's speed, a trick he learned from his Earth 90 doppelganger because, sure, last episode, who cares? Eddie then calls on Speed from the other fallen speedsters to repower himself, conveniently taking them off the board, and he disappears. Jay says that Eddie's going to the source of his speed, where he will overload and kill himself, just like Thawne did. So, problem solved. I guess the final episode looks like it's going to wrap up pretty quickly as Thawne goes off to kill himself. Dimitri, what did you think about these two fights? the sort of Deus Machina, sorry, I mispronounced that, Deus Ex Machina, a version of the way both fights ended.
It was great to see Jay come back. It felt like a little bit of a letdown that Cobalt Blue kills all his minions because, it did seem like, while we have seen them all defeated, like, maybe there's a way they could sort of, come back for one last big battle or what have you. But I guess they did kind of want to end the whole series with more Talk No Jitsu to kind of emphasize what a good guy Barry is. So, it was interesting. I almost wish Barry had, fought Cobalt Blue at the end because seemingly with him absorbing, the powers of all his minions, he would be, worlds faster than Barry, and Barry would have to find some other way to take him down. But I wish there was more of a payoff for him devouring all his minions.
Instead of just letting Eddie die and the whole cycle restarting with another avatar, Barry wants to save Eddie. Kyon says she can get Barry into the negative Speed Force, but tells Barry he has to change Eddie's perspective to have any chance. Barry says he doesn't know how to make a better world, but she tells him that nature is about coexistence. Barry doesn't seem to be buying it, but Kyon tells him to believe in the impossible. Where have we heard that before? Barry goes into the negative Speed Force and tells Eddie the connection to the Speed Force will kill him. Eddie doesn't believe him because, again, the negative Speed Force brought him back. Seems a pretty good deal to him. They fight, but Barry refuses to fight back. Eddie starts becoming the Reverse Flash due to the hatred and the influence of the negative Speed Force. But Barry tells Eddie that he has to remain the avatar of the negative Speed Force, but fight the hate. They have to work together to create a better world. Eddie reminds us, as the viewers, that he was a hero all along because he tears the crystal out of his chest and smashes it. Eddie says they won't always see eye to eye, but to tell Iris that he's happy for her. I'm kicking myself for not saying this last episode because I wondered all along if the resolution was going to be that Eddie would reject the negative Speed Force and just use the power. But I thought that if something like that was going to happen, it would have happened last episode. So I didn't say it. I missed out on what would have been a fantastic prediction. But, Jeff, Flash's series finale battle is Talk No Jitsu. I think we all assumed that was going to be the case, right? We didn't think that Barry was going to win everything just by running faster than the other guy this one last time.
Yes, Brittany would be proud. Shout out to Brittany. I found this version of Talk No Jitsu to be a bit underwhelming. Just because it happened so fast. Faster than I am in trying to express myself in this. It just really did. Like, it was like, I am going to murder you. I have made you, shoot blood onto the wall, and I have broken the table. And, oh, you want us to coexist? Okay, we could do that. We're not always going to agree, but we'll shake hands, and we'll talk about it. At the time, we will not agree. Like, it was way too fast for me. It was way too fast. Like, way too fast. How is he beating the shit out of you? I'm not going to fight you. And now we're at peace. Like, it was way too fast. Like, I needed that conversation to just be a hair longer. If this was going to be the final Talk No Jitsu, this has to be the talkiest Talk No Jitsu that ever did Talk No Jitsu. Like, it needed to be powerful. And for me, it was a bit unbelievable. And I know we're supposed to be believing in the impossible in this episode. They mentioned it so many times. But I felt like it was just way too fast. If I had any sort of nitpick about this episode, it would be how this was resolved. Like, I don't care that Cobalt Blue sucked up the life source of everybody. Like, I don't care that he, dove deep into the negative Speed Force and was sucking up all that to become ever more powerful and that sort of thing. This Talk No Jitsu moment just seemed incredibly unbelievable because it just happened so fast. Like, they didn't even give it like a cliffhanger between the commercials where Barry says something and then we're left to sort of like wonder, is he going to accept? And we have to sit through like 5 or 6 or 7 commercials and then we see, oh, he actually processed all that during the commercials and decided yes. It just seemed way too fast for me. And I know this is a show about the fastest man alive, but it just seemed way too fast.
No, I agree with you. I think, and I think you've got a good idea there that if they had done a commercial break, because any amount of time and any amount of, beating the hell out of Barry could have been happening during the commercial break. I think I accepted it because it did feed into that thought that I had in the previous episode. Well, Eddie's a hero. So, I can see him having the hero turn and repudiate.
I don't
the
disagree
negative
with
Speed
that.
Force. And also the fact is, he gets to, be his own man with super speed. So, and you're alive again. So kind of a good deal all around for Eddie. Barry ends up back at the hospital just in time for Iris to give birth. Of course he did. Team Flash confirms the timelines are back to normal. Mark figures out that Chester is unscathed because he has Hawking radiation in his cells. Chester has black hole powers as a holdover from when he was merged with a black hole. He's the Chunk, thus giving Chester his comics accurate name. And somewhere, comic nerds were going squee. And as Jeff pointed out, which is something that I'd never thought about before, is the reason that Allegra called Chuck, was that just a little nod and a wink that, Chester P. Runk in the comics was the sometimes villain, sometimes friend, Chunk. We'll have a moment to discuss that. Everyone heads to the hospital, including Nora, as they wait for the birth. Keown is approached by Harrison Wells, Timeless Wells, a good version of Wells. It's getting confusing here. It got really confusing when I was trying to keep all the Noras straight that's going to come up. But he's there to tell her to ascend and become the protector of all things. She says she's sad about having to say goodbye to her family, but Timeless Wells tells her it's about carrying a piece of the ones you love whenever and wherever you go. Now, I knew Tom Cavanaugh was coming back as Reverse Flash. I was surprised to see Timeless Wells show up, and I was happy because Tom Cavanaugh spent as much time on the show as a good guy as a bad guy. So I thought it was kind of nice having him in this form. Plus, he got to hang out with the gang in the final scene. Dimitri, the baby has not yet been born. Any thoughts on this scene? And the whole Chunk reveal, and you can weigh in on, Jeff's idea that Chuck and Chunk might have been a little, subtle reference.
Yeah, I actually did not recognize the reference. I was unfamiliar with the character until the way he kept saying it. I was like, oh, this has got to be a comic book reference. And so I looked into it after the fact. But, honestly, I agree with you. It was nice to see, good Wells. And in my opinion, my favorite of the, good Wells on the show, it seems strange that he was kind of like, oh, it's time for you to ascend, like this all-powerful Merlin-type figure. I kind of wish he would have just been there. Maybe Jesse Quick would have also been there. Maybe Wally would have been there, just to see Iris deliver Nora. I thought, Keown could have been like, it's my time to ascend without that being his message. It just seems strange to me that he was the one to tell her that.
Yeah, I think you're right that Keown has obviously sensed that in the past. Again, I think the reason for doing this is just to give that fan service moment of, hey, it's Tom Cavanaugh in his good guy, in one of his good guy forms. I agree with you that I think she probably could have figured it out on her own if she can do everything else she did in this episode. I'm sure she could have figured that out. Iris gives birth, and baby Nora has arrived, and Jeff and I look like fools for confidently, some would say arrogantly, predicting something different would happen.
Mm-hmm.
At Star, Keown says her goodbyes before shedding her mortal body in a stream of elements. Left in her place is Caitlin, alive and well. Bit of a surprise for me, but, again, it's fan service. You want the whole gang back together. When Keown no longer needed a mortal body, she left it behind, restoring Caitlin to life. Bit convenient, but hey, as with Timeless Wells, it's nice that Danielle Panabaker could be in the final scene. Right, Jeff?
Yes. Let me just say this. When Caitlin returned, she should have bitch-slapped all of those motherfuckers. And she should have been like, y'all didn't mourn me. Because that's how I feel. I'm glad she's back.
I wonder if she knew. Probably not.
Probably not. I'm glad she's back. Because, as I said, when she unceremoniously died nobody mourned her. We had an entire episode where we talked about everyone waxing poetically about Frost. And when she died, I get it, it's 13 episode season, but when she died, like, it was like nothing. Like, not even, oh, I miss my friend, or nothing. Like, it was like, now they're like, oh, we missed you, and we're so glad. Like, what? Like, no, 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 no. And if she's inhabiting the body and she, like, seems to be, like, knowledgeable about a lot of stuff that was going down with the Keone of it all, like, I would have been pissed. I would have been glad to have been back in my body, but I would have been like, you damn people forgot about me. Like, I'm just saying, like, yeah, if we're going to go into the whole Eddie feeling like, y'all forgot about me, then frickin' Caitlyn should have been like, you all forgot about me. Now, as far as the twist that never did twist, I am kind of disappointed that they didn't do like a wrinkle in timey-wiminess. Like, because, things, whatever, whatever, she would have had twins. Like, I think that would have been wonderful because it would have fed into something that we've seen with the show, that yes, they seem to know the future, but it doesn't always happen how they think or how they have found out things happen in the future. And that would have been just a nice little wrinkle. I think they could have played with some of the comedy of that, like, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but they could have played with the comedy of that in the party that ends up happening. Or even like in the birthing scene. But yeah, I wish
except
that
that
they would have
adult
done it.
Nora would have vanished from existence, which isn't sort of high note you want to end
No,
on.
no, because she would have been the same one. She just would have had a brother.
That's not how genetics works. One sperm and one egg have to meet. If you don't have sex at the same time, if it's not the exact same process, if she was conceived even a minute later, she'd be a completely different person. They'd be a completely different person.
Well, she could have disappeared, but then she would have poofed there as the other one.
Because total scientific accuracy
Well, there
is
is
always the concern
that part,
of
yeah.
the CW.
It is. We've talked about it.
That's why if you run really fast, you get a lightning sword to slash people with.
Well, that's just common sense.
Yeah. Isn't that how Luke Skywalker did it?
No, he runs normal speed. Slow at times.
Dimitri, how happy were you that Caitlyn came back to life? Not with any sense that Frost is in tow. I'm sure you were happy about that.
I wish they did this 3 seasons ago. Obviously the biggest letdown of that moment was that she was not able to be reunited with her true love, Cisco. I really thought Carlos Valdez would make an appearance. One horrifying thought I had was that when we briefly thought Chester was going to die, I was like, oh, for the final battle, is Cisco going to come in and take over comms? Which would have been weird. Would have been a weird sort of, oh, Chester is replaceable kind of moment. But for a second, I was scared that was what they were going to do. But I was sure we were going to see Cisco at some point, just for a scene. But sadly, no. Which was a shame. It would have been nice to see, we have Wells, we have, Caitlyn. It would have been nice to see Cisco as well, just, so Barry could get back to his, OG, starting crew. But, I guess Carlos Valdez is busy. Maybe he has another project.
He did. He was shooting a musical for Hulu.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I've seen an interview with him in which he said, it just didn't work out. But that was an interesting point. Weren't we told there was going to be some astonishing, super secret reveal?
That the paparazzis, they haven't taken a picture of. Danielle, not Danielle, Danny Nicolette. She was like, oh my God, it's so good. I'm like, what the hell were you talking about? I'm trying to think of people that showed up that we would have been shocked by. And
maybe she's referring to Caitlyn?
But she's a cast member. How would that be shocking that the paparazzi would not have snapped? They would have snapped photos of Danielle Panabaker on the sets. It was weird hype. that I did not understand
Yeah, just there was no.
at
I mean,
all.
but we talked at the beginning of the season, and I said, I would really like to have seen, Melissa Benoist coming
Hmm.
back, for an episode, and you said, Cisco, and then I just immediately went, well, yeah, obviously, to the point where it's like, well, it's so obvious Cisco's coming
Yeah,
back. Why would we even discuss it?
I'm
But yeah,
shocked.
yeah, just and again, might have been, misleading of the press, but anyway, so
Wait, can I
we
I
can.
just want to give my just 2 cents. I'm still shocked because we had this whole conversation last week, Professor, and you brought up the Entertainment Weekly interview, and I was like, I feel like it's bullshit. Like it's just to cover up the surprise because, you're not going to ruin the surprise a week before the finale. And I left this episode still genuinely gobsmacked that they were not able to do anything, especially because earlier this year, he was like, he being Carlos Valdez was like, oh, it wouldn't feel right if I'm not there. And they didn't, I mean, he could have been over Zoom. I mean, well, Zoom, because there was Zoom in the episode. But he could have been over Zoom. He could have been over Skype. They could have done like a voice over thing, like on the telephone, like they did with Victor Garber a couple of episodes ago. I'm just genuinely shocked. No one's that busy. Like no one is that busy that you can't sit down somewhere with a green screen behind you and record something for like 90 seconds or less. Like I was just genuinely shocked that they could not find a way at all to bring him into it. And I'm not even the biggest Cisco fan. This is known on the podcast. I found his final episode underwhelming. He landed a blimp. So, but it would have been nice to have seen him there because he's an OG. And it's just genuinely shocking that, listen, we're on the outside looking in. We don't know what they tried to do. But from the outside looking in, it looks like no one really went above and beyond to like try to make it happen. But maybe they did, and it just didn't work out.
I mean, the end of Supergirl even got Callista Flockhart back, and
Right?
she
And she
hated
was clearly
everyone.
on
So
green
yeah,
screen in California.
but it didn't matter because she was there as part of the episode.
True.
Anyway, 1 week later, it's a party at Barry and Iris's home for little Nora, and adult Nora's also there. So is Timeless Wells. So is the whole gang. I'm not going to list everyone. Adult Nora, tells her parents things will be timey-wiminess, will be even crazier before Bart is born. So that's something for them to look forward to. Joe gives a speech acknowledging Iris's achievements as well as Cecile's, and then proposes to Cecile. She says, yes. You know what? I'd honestly forgotten those two were living in sin. Dimitri, were you surprised by the proposal?
I was for two reasons. One, I thought they were married already. Two, I honestly I was always thought it's rude to like propose at somebody's wedding. It felt a little weird that this is like Iris's kind of post baby shower, not baby shower.
It's not a wedding.
Baby celebration. It kind of stole thunder from the occasion a little bit. But mainly I thought they were married already. So I was like, where's Joe going with this? Then obviously Singh is carrying the ring. And we all see where it's going. But it was kind of like, huh? When Cecile says finally, I'm like, yeah, no, I agree. I thought he did it already. But I mean, I guess they wanted to end with as much cuteness as possible, and Jesse Martin, Danny Nicolette, they make a cute couple.
Well, and also, let's face it, there is precedent in the Arrowverse for stealing thunder at someone else's big event.
Yeah, but he's dead now. Oh well.
Later, Barry goes to deal with a fussy baby Nora. He tells her to believe in the impossible. Turns out Barry's voiceover at the start of the episode was him talking to baby Nora and telling her the story. He tells her that their family's been blessed with amazing gifts and that maybe they should share them. We see him casting out his lightning to gift superpowers to Avery Ho, Max Mercury, and Jesse Chambers, who are all speedsters in the comics, but who have never, to the best of my knowledge, been mentioned in this series. No reason was given as to why they were chosen, how they were chosen, how their powers will be used. It was just thrown in. Again, fan service is like, this was mentioned in a comic. Happy now, fanboys? Barry then tells Nora that by sharing a piece of themselves, maybe they can create a better world where everyone coexists and nothing is impossible as long as we believe. Jeff, what did you think of the resolution?
Thank you for paying attention to this television show that you moderate because we met Avery Ho last season.
Did we?
Yes, Bart has a crush on her.
Really? I don't remember. I didn't recognize her at all.
Yes. So she's the only one that's recognizable. The other two were random people.
I don't know, maybe it was because I was so convinced I'd never seen the other two that I just lumped her in with it. But no, I didn't recognize her at all.
Yeah, we saw her last season. Yeah, a couple times. And there was that whole episode where Bart and Nora run into her, and I think she spills coffee. And okay, all right. I actually enjoyed the end. Whether we want to call it the voiceover we heard at the beginning was him speaking to Nora, whether it was just a callback to the very first episode, and then this at the end was also a callback to the very first episode. However you want to call it, I enjoy a callback. So I thoroughly enjoyed this moment. It was really well done. The voiceover work was really good. I much rather enjoyed this than what they are sort of like the fan theory was online about Barry sacrificing himself and being the lightning bolt. I like that he is spreading the lightning bolt. I don't really know how that works. Does that mean he has less power now because he has power to other people? I don't really know what that means, but it was kind of nice. And I'm also, let's be real, I mean, it was nice to see a diverse group of future speedsters out there. What does that mean? Does it mean Barry's going to train them? You know, this is stuff that we can sort of fanfic in our minds and do headcanon about it. But it was a really neat way to show us that anything can happen, that anything is possible, even the impossible. I do feel like maybe this is one of those things that sort of changes the future again, because I feel like we've never heard of these people in the future per se. You know, when we have like
perhaps
Nora.
they die when they're hit by lightning, like everyone would.
Okay. Well, there is that. But Barry's lightning is special. So, like, we haven't heard about them, like, from, like, the future people that we've seen. So could this be a little, you know, taste of what we've seen in the past, as I said, you know, with if they would have had twins and that sort of thing, where, you know, they can sort of shape the future in a different kind of way. I don't know, but it was really nice, and I love the little purple lightning that was in Baby Nora's eyes as well. We sort of
was cute.
Yeah, we sort of glossed over this, but I loved Joe's song. Hearing Jesse L. Martin sing it was fantastic. I know a lot of people know him from Law and Order, but I first saw Jesse L. Martin in a show called Ally McBeal, and he sang on that as well. So
yes,
seeing
when I hear Jesse L. Martin sing, I want him belting it out. I don't want him singing sotto voce to a little kid. I want him belting out the standards because he's got a tremendous voice. And I don't think you appreciate it as much when you're just sort of singing in a little voice to a little baby. Anyone can do that.
Well, supposedly, the song that he sang was actually a song that he had written for one of the producer's children.
Yes.
So just to make that moment infinitely cuter, as if it was not, you know, adorable enough already, I thought I'd throw that little factoid in.
No, you're right. He had tailored the song specifically to that child, and so what he did was he altered a couple of the words to make it make sense for the show and for clearly, you know, Joe singing it to his granddaughter.
Dimitri, how'd you like the way things wrapped up? This is the end of the series, the end of the episode. How'd you like it? I thought it was unnecessary fan service, although I did like the fact that we found out that the opening was him talking to Nora.
Well, so that's what I was saying. I wish that, like, his talk to Nora had exactly matched the opening, because he deviates from it slightly, which makes it much more believable, but it would have been nice if it had sort of come full circle that way. I'm with you. I did not like the creation of new speedsters simply because, you know, it leaves us with more questions than resolution, because it's like, does he still have powers? Has he given up his powers? What, you know, how did he choose these people? You know, do they just suddenly have powers now, or is he gonna, like, train them somehow? I feel like, you know, he could have just, you know, lay down in bed next to Iris, you know, cradling Nora, and, you know, we all would have been happy. I feel like the fan service was a little unnecessary there. maybe if there was talk of a follow-up Flash series like Flash Generation 2 or something, like then I could understand them sort of shoehorning it in. But I think, it's been said all around that this is the end of the Arrowverse. So it seemed, it just took up unnecessary time.
I was terrified for like a good second as he was running out there to do whatever it is he was going to do, that he was going to pull a, Buffy the Vampire Slayer and give everyone the power. And I just thought, because there is actually a comic book series, in the Flash where that happens, where everyone in Central City gets Flash powers. And it's, as you would guess, pandemonium. So I guess I should just be happy that we only got the 3. Before we move on to the MVP section, this is the end of an era. It's not just the end of The Flash, the TV show, it's the end of the Arrowverse. This, as I said back in our first episode of this season, this bizarre moment in television history where genre television essentially took over a broadcast network for many nights of the week. Someone has, if you were to count up the hours, there's nothing that really compares to the Arrowverse in terms of, over the 10 years that it's existed, how much airtime it has filled, the sequential story, the interlaced network of it. The only thing that would compare to it is not the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but probably the Marvel Comics itself. Maybe Star Trek is starting to move towards that. And in the years to come, I'm sure Star Trek will pass it. But the show that started it all, as I said in that first episode, because if Flash had stumbled, running joke intentional, we would have had no Arrowverse. They would have said, this is a terrible idea. Let's just go back to the guy who's brooding and growling at people and filling them full of arrows. And let's not try to make things light. Let's not try to make things fun. Let's not try to introduce superpowers. Flash made all of that possible, which means Flash really made the Arrowverse possible. So let's take a look back. First, the showrunner consistently said, Eric Wallace, shout out to him. I think he's done some good work and some good things and some bad things. But he said he wasn't trying to wrap up the Arrowverse with this season. But I'm going to ask both of you, how did you like how the Arrowverse wrapped up? We did get the return of Oliver Queen. We didn't, as we were talking about in this episode, get the return of some of the favorites that we would have liked to see. But we did see, some sparks of the other Arrowverse shows. John Diggle was there. Oliver Queen was there. Dreamer was there, so on and so forth. Batwoman was there in 2 forms. So there was some fan service to the larger Arrowverse. Sadly, no mention of Black Lightning. But anyway, how did you like how the Arrowverse got wrapped up? And what would you have liked to see in this final episode or maybe the final season that we didn't get? I'll start with you, Jeff.
Let me start off with the positive, because I do want to echo what you said, Professor. To quote Brittany, one of our former co-hosts here, as well as across the Arrowverse podcast that we have had on Papi Chulo Radio, what a time to be alive. Like, I don't think we will ever see anything like this again on a major network television, on a major television network, I should say, where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of television a season. And it was like interconnected stories. It was genre television, in particular, was superhero genre television. We're never going to see that again. Like, as much as we talk about the highs and the lows, and as much as we can be a little bit persnickety about and nitpicky about things with the Arrowverse, this was a moment in time. And if you're a fan of the comic books or just, the superhero genre, period, this was a spectacular time to see this spectacle, because it'll never happen again. I mean, and let's be real, it's never going to happen again because, number one, the 2 major comic book publishers, I mean, they're owned, their media is owned by 2 separate companies, Marvel by Disney, so they're not going to put their stuff on network television. It's going to be on their streaming service. And DC with Warner Brothers, and they have their own streaming service as well. And I just can't see any other, comic book staple out there that any network would even attempt to try to do something like this again. So this was, this was a moment. This was an era. And this will be studied in the future. Somebody out there is going to write articles, and they will continue to podcast about this, because this is something that we will probably never see ever again on a broadcast television network. So kudos to them for doing it. 10 years. I mean, that's an amazing run. It really was. And I mean, they even had another spinoff in sort of pre-production that was officially canceled, or at least they announced that there was the Justice U one with Diggle was not going to continue on. But as far as this show and the Arrowverse as a whole, I have read Eric Wallace's interviews. There was one interview where he was like, yeah, we're going to do some stuff to call outs for the Arrowverse because I understand the gravity about it and all that kind of stuff. Okay. As far as this being the end of the Arrowverse, I think it was a miss for me. Like, the standard bearer, the gold standard for an Arrowverse series ending for a final season, for me, will always be Arrow. The way that they handled that, the way that they included so many callbacks and full circle moments, and yes, that final season, we can fault it for being a season that really was to set up a crossover, but what they did in setting up that crossover and giving so many full circle moments, so many callbacks, so many guest stars from the past, it all worked. I wish that they would have done something similar to that in this season, as opposed to saving that for the final 4 episodes. I'll say this, as mixed bag as these final 4 episodes have been, if they would have expanded upon it, had we gotten teases of Cobalt Blue from the start of this season, maybe at the end, in like the quote-unquote post-credits scenes, I think that would have been interesting. What I would have preferred as far as how they incorporated the other Arrowverse properties, I wish that we would have seen Adventures Through Time or something like that, or Villains of the Week, or Batwoman needs help with this, let's go to Gotham. Like, I wish we would have seen that kind of stuff versus like the Red Death situation, and then all of like the interlude stuff in the middle. And then finally we have a final arc. Like, I wish we would have gotten, an episode with like the Legends, an episode with Batwoman, an episode with the Pierce family from Black Lightning, maybe an episode if they wanted to wrap up, Dreamer. If we would have had everything else, I would have been fine with that Dreamer episode as well. So that would have been my preference. The Pierces from Black Lightning are in town because Lynn is going to be getting an award, and then all of a sudden there's a meta of the week, and Black Lightning and maybe even Thunder or whomever else, they end up teaming up to help Team Flash take them down. The Legends, they get saved by the Flash in the time prison that they were in, but maybe that's at the start of the episode, and then there's like a whole bunch of like Legends-y shenanigans that would have happened for the rest of the episode. I don't know. Like, there's so many shoulda, coulda, wouldas for me, just because Arrow's final season was so good that I wish this final season for The Flash would have been so good. And yeah, that's the only thing that I could nitpick about it. I just wish that it would have felt much more like the Arrowverse is ending. I, as a showrunner, understand that responsibility, because we can tell Eric Wallace is a fanboy. If you've ever read any of his interviews, he's a fan of The Flash. I just wish he would have been a fan of the entire Arrowverse, and he would have shown a little bit more respect.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about a possible season 10, but part of it is they only had the 13 episodes. So even if they did want to do more Arrowverse service, he had stories that he wanted to tell about West Allen and the rest of the team. Dimitri, what would you like to have seen, in this final episode or this final season to ring down the curtain on the Arrowverse?
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen, a lot of it is just more people. I would have loved to see the Pierce family. A lot of people were kind of clamoring for Anissa and Iris to become friends. I would have loved to see that. I would have loved to see, Supergirl back. I thought the farewell to Oliver was nice. It would have been nice if, when Iris gives birth, or even, later at the house party, there's just, the full Arrowverse kind of there, sort of like
Diggle.
Diggle, Jefferson Pierce, Supergirl's there, the legends are there, everyone's just like, hey, you're here. Like that would have been a nice sort of just, okay, we recognize this is the end of the Arrowverse, you know, let's put a bow on it kind of moment. So yeah, I think that was a little disappointing. I also feel that, this storyline was an interesting one. And I feel like some storylines, Cicada, were, sort of stretched too far. But I felt like they could have had some really interesting conversations about, Eddie being brought back to life and then suddenly understandably resentful of Barry and, Barry having to reckon with, maybe some feelings of guilt over Eddie's sacrifice or, not knowing how to handle Eddie's resentment. Shows like This Is Us have handled this sort of issue really well. So, it did seem like this was a great issue and a great way to sort of end the season, given that, it references something at the end of the first season. But I did feel like even this storyline, this big bad, was kind of rushed. And I want to be fair here. It's really hard to get actors into a room once you've let them go. And, all the shows that we're talking about missing, those actors have been let go and have to find new ways to pay the bills. And, it's probably pretty hard to get them back for one episode. But, we did have Crisis on Infinite Earths where we got so many people back to the CW just for little tidbit appearances, right? I feel like a little more of an effort could have been made to get at least a few more people in the room so that we could say goodbye. It could even be like, hey, we're getting a call on Zoom and, all the actors just sort of say hey really quickly, on their TV or something. It is definitely the end of an era. And throw as much shit as we want, we all enjoyed this era, as evidenced by the fact that we've been doing this podcast for so long now. And it did feel like it could have, the era as a whole, not just the show The Flash, but the era as a whole, the Arrowverse as a whole, could have had more of a send-off in recognition of how long fans have spent watching this, how many people have, loved it enough that it's kept going all these years. I would have liked to see a crossover level goodbye for, the end of this entire universe.
I was just thinking I would have loved to see Jordan Fisher and Jesse L. Martin singing a duet.
Yeah.
Remember back in the crazy days when they would do a musical episode or they would cross over into an alternate Earth and Joe was a lounge singer and they sort of I wouldn't say leaned into the crazy because that's really more of a Legends thing. But, they were a little more creative in their storytelling. It seems like, like in terms of just throwing out everything and doing something that's completely, off the map. It seems like, they were so in lockstep to telling this story. And again, they only had 13 episodes to do it. But I do think that that Flash sort of became a bit ossified in terms of how they did that. Now, they did break away from that. There were several episodes, the Dreamer episodes, and we talked about, some of the satisfying episodes this season were episodes that didn't seem to have much to do with the overall arc of the season. Just felt, more of that would have been nice. And of course, obviously, justice for the Legends. And as I said, all we needed would Barry, whoosh into scene and Iris says, where were you, hon? And he says, oh, just, rescuing those knuckleheads, the Legends. They send their love. That's all you needed, but, again, only 13 episodes and Eric Wallace did have a lot he wanted to do. As I said, most of what I saw that he was talking about wanting to do was stuff that didn't particularly interest me. The Blackest Night storyline, which is, cross Green Lanterns with zombies. Not interested. Although one thing that he said that actually, at first I looked at it and thought, I wouldn't like that. But he said, it's sort of like his headcanon that Tom Felton's character ended up marrying Patty Spivot, Barry's girlfriend from season 1 or season 2. And they were like a crime-fighting, mystery-hunting duo now. And he wanted to bring them back for that in season 10, which I would have been up for that. I would have been curious about seeing that.
Which sounds
That
like
would've been
what
cute.
he would have done
Now-
with Elongated Man and Sue Dearborn.
Something like that.
Oh, where
yeah.
was
Hopefully-
Sue?
Hey, yeah, good point. No Sue. Probably Dimitri's angry tweets got to them.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to rank seasons, mainly because I don't remember what happened in each season. 9 years is a long time and a lot of television under the bridge. But do you have any favorite or least favorite storylines? Let's just take the forces off the table. I think we can all agree, let's never speak of it again. Force is not a 4-letter word, but hey. Dimitri, any favorite or least favorite storylines?
I would have to say honestly, I feel like season 1 was my favorite. I feel like one of the unfortunate choices of this show is Barry loses his happy-go-luckiness very quickly, and it seemed like they were very eager to borrow, the broodiness from Arrow, and have Barry like weighed down by the guilt of his decisions and whatnot. But, sort of like cutesy, derpy, funny Barry, who doesn't really know what he can do and is sort of figuring out as he goes and has to confront his childhood bully and stuff. That was a lot of fun. Cisco was a great sort of, guide through that transition for him. There was some tension that eventually transformed into friendship between him and Caitlin Snow. Season 1, Wells Thawne, I don't think there was really a better villain, which is kind of why we keep seeing him, right? Like, he was just peak from his introduction in episode 1. He's just so menacing, so two-faced, that I really think the show peaked early, like peaked at the start, and, stayed fun for a few seasons and then sort of got a little bit, more and more out of this world. But, it had a great start for a show that was kind of born out of Arrow. They really threw the mold away, and it's kind of a shame that they brought the mold back seemingly as the seasons went on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think, obviously season 1, for all the reasons that, we talked about ad nauseum over 9 years, the vibrancy, the sense of enthusiasm and joy that we got from that season that, we didn't get. We got bursts of it and little, nuggets of it from time to time. But no, just, reflecting what you said, when Harrison Wells first got up out of his wheelchair and all of us watching went, oh my God, he's the bad guy. I thought that was just a great reveal and, classic letting the audience see it, but the characters don't know. I think that was a very well done situation of doing that. And I really liked that sort of storytelling. And, Tom Cavanaugh did a great job of playing it. I think, but I think there is a reason why he is still up there as the top villain. It has nothing to do with, him becoming the Reverse Flash and glowing red eyes and anything like that. It's just, man, the level of menace and also, the strange level of the fact that, he was actually starting to feel an affection towards Barry and an affection towards Cisco, despite everything he did. Let's not forget that after he disappeared after the end of season 1, he left Star Labs to Barry, which is how Barry's been funding this whole thing. And by the way, Barry, it's been 9 freaking years. Fix up the exterior of Star Labs. For God's sakes. Jeff, favorite storyline or least favorite storyline?
Well, I will echo the season 1 stuff. I mean, season 1 was spectacular. All of the crossovers. I think all of the crossovers were really good. Some better than others, but they were all just incredibly fantastical and incredibly entertaining to watch. Just thinking about the various villains and that sort of thing, because we do sort of like characterize the seasons based off of the villains. I want to give a little nod to season 4 with The Thinker. I thought that was an interesting concept. I don't know if it needed an entire season, so I will give props to Eric Wallace for doing the graphic novel change when he became showrunner. But like I remember loving Marlize. We got to meet some of our favorite recurring people, like our girl, the unlucky girl, Becky Sharp. Like we got to see some really neat stuff and almost comedic stuff that season before it took like a really dark turn. So that one was an interesting one, and I feel like nobody mentions that one. We also got to see Barry and Iris in therapy, and I've talked about therapy with Barry and Iris before. So I thought that was a really neat season. As far as the lows, I mean, Dimitri sort of said it, but I'll echo it. Cicada was a low. And as interesting as it was, and as fascinating as how like the visual effects team did things, and even we had a really good villainess for that arc, the mirror storyline dragged way too long than it needed to, and that's no diss to the actors or anything like that. It just I have to blame the writers on that. It just went on and on and on, and then we had the COVID break and they came back and it was still on the mirror thing. If there's any negative that I'll give to Eric Wallace, I'll just sort of say this as the stinger for this moment of mine, is the fact that he seems to be the type of person, when he has an idea and he writes a story, he likes to see it through. And we saw that with the mirror storyline, because he could have tried to wrap that up in one episode, because there was that long-ass hiatus. He could have done it, but it took him like 3 episodes to wrap it up. And he had all these ideas for like 2 seasons that he had to cram into 1 season. Had he just like started off, clean slate and maybe incorporated some of that stuff but done something different, we might have had a better, more cohesive final season.
Okay, it's time for the last ever MVP pick. Most valuable player, state which character impressed you throughout the episode and why. Once a character's been chosen, they cannot be selected again, so choose wisely. Dimitri, you couldn't be here to choose last week, so I'll let you choose this week. Who was your MVP of this final episode of The Flash?
And just to clarify, this is for the episode, right?
For the episode, yeah.
Yeah, gotta give it to Cobalt Blue. I think part of what made season 1 great was this, what's the word? Not love interest, but, competitive love interest. Like this rival, Barry's rival for Iris's heart, who was hard to hate. He was, a genuinely good guy. You could genuinely see why Iris liked him. It's just sort of an unfortunate situation. And obviously he and Barry have their conflicts, but generally, this was a memorable character, which is why I think they were interested in bringing him back as seasons went on. And I do think Rick Cosnett struck a great balance between a nod to that, White Knight character and, him slowly becoming more and more unhinged. And that was fun to see. That's why, the whole time, for the past 2 episodes, I was thinking, I could have watched more of you. I could have watched less of Cicada. I agree with Jeff. I could have watched less of the Mirrorverse. I could have watched more of this version of Cobalt Blue. But either way, for the brief time that we had him, I think Rick did an amazing job.
Jeff, who is your MVP?
My MVP is going to go to Joe, because unlike the professor, I like the song. And also...
I was going to give it to him anyway.
Okay. All right.
Because unlike some people I could name, he came back for the series finale.
Oh, that is true. Ooh, Carlos Valdez. Siski, they coming for you. But yeah, Joe, I loved the song. I loved the tender moment that he had with Iris. I've missed that. I mean, unfortunately, he was out, filming another television show. So what can you do? I mean, he's got to make some money. And yeah, it was unfortunate because he had such a huge presence over the series' run, over those 8 seasons that he was a series regular, that he was incredibly missed this season. But the times that we got him, they were just fantastic. And it just reminded me of why I just adore the Joe character. But the singing, the moment with Iris, and then the proposal. I remember earlier this season, at some point many episodes ago, I asked, are they married? Are they not married? And both of you were like, yes, they're married. And I was like, I don't think they're married. And then we got the answer in this episode, or at least we got the reminder. No, they're not married. And, Dimitri might not have liked it, or at least, didn't like that he feels that thunder was being stolen. But, bears got lightning. Who cares? Knock on wood. But he did it, and it was a cute little moment, and even Cecile dropping the pillow, it was adorable, and it was another great moment for Joe. So I'm going to give it to Joe.
I'm going to give it to XS. I've always been more fond of Jessica than I think you guys are. I know than Dimitri often is. I think she's been great. She's been less derpy than she was when she was first introduced. We also haven't gotten nearly as much of her as we got in the past, so I think in small doses she was quite good. I think the fact that she's obviously heard tales about how Savitar tried to kill her mom, and so she was prepared for that and was able to turn it around on him. And as Jeff points out, on some Freudian level, she was killing a version of her dad. So, congratulations on therapy. But obviously, she was great. The fact that she did stick around for her own birth, even if it would have, problems with the timeline. The fact that she brought her own merch. So basically, Baby Nora is wearing her own merch from the future, which is a baller move. Also, this just occurs to me that the onesie she brought back was an XS, extra small. But thank God this is coming to an end. I can't believe I did that. Anyway, so yes, I'm giving it for the one last time to Jessica Parker Kennedy, who I've always found charming. And come on, let's face it, she's Canadian. Now, how would you rate the episode on a scale of 1 to 10 lightning bolts? Just the episode, not the season. Point system is allowed. If you found the episode exceptional, deserving of more than a 10, you may archive the episode in the Flash Museum. Jeff, how would you rate the episode?
I'm going to get grief, but you know what? I don't care. This was not the best episode. It was, I would say as a season finale, it was good. As a series finale, it was decent. As the end of the Arrowverse, it was lacking. But, it is the end of an era, and there were a lot of moments that I truly did enjoy. There were a lot of moments that I truly did nitpick. There were a lot of questionable decisions and moments in which my mind was like, I don't know how this is possible, but I gotta give props to the actors. I enjoy these characters, and I feel like everybody was in it to win it. So for historical reasons, I will archive this. In reality, it's probably like an 8.5, but I'm going to go on record by archiving it.
Dimitri, will you stand up against the peer pressure from Jeff, arguing that we should grade this one differently just because it happens to be the last episode?
No, I didn't say all that, but I'm glad you interpreted that way.
So I agree and disagree. I agree that it should be archived just because, it's the end of an era. If it wasn't the end of an era, I wouldn't give it an 8, I'd give it a 7. Just because I do think, if we're going to rate it in the context of being the ending of the universe, I think we should also, count the disappointments that we have about it being the end of the universe, and so many characters missing, the weird, speedsters shoehorned in at the end, that I think takes some points off for me. So I think as an episode, I'd give it a 7, but as the ending, it belongs in the archive. What can I say?
I love that I've set a trend. I'm a trendsetter.
Well, the trend ends now. This does not belong in, don't archive it just because it happened to fall in a certain part. Archive it if it was well written, it really wasn't. The acting was perfectly fine, but this fell down trying to accomplish too much hand-waving, too much, it was senioritis, basically, we're getting out of school. It doesn't really matter if we're just finishing this up because, there's going to be no accountability for that. We're never going to have to explain this in a future episode. There was so much hand-waving stuff going on in the episode. And I get it. You're rushing to get to the end. There was stuff that I liked. Ultimately, I did like the fact that they didn't swerve us. And that Nora was born just fine, and it was Nora, and, Jessica Parker Kennedy didn't disappear or appear with a different hair color and, spouting an Australian accent or something like that. But ultimately, I just didn't find this particularly great. It wasn't a bad episode. I just didn't think it was all that great. I mean, I would expect more from the final episode. And so unlike you guys who are archiving it just because it's last episode, I would have expected better from a last episode. I would expect, them to really try their best to produce a really good episode of TV for the last episode. Didn't feel they did that here. It just, 7.5 for me. Now, it's time to grade the entire season. Now, grading, we're going with A, B, C, D, or F. You are allowed pluses and minuses. I know it's tough to cast your mind back. It's only 13 episodes. But man, it just seems like longer, doesn't it? It always seems that way at the end of the season, even a shorter season, but we did have a couple of gaps this time. But basically, this has been the last season of The Flash. Certainly not the worst episode, but you know what? Tip my hand slightly. Certainly not the best either. You know what? I'll go first simply because you guys have gone first for the previous two rounds. There was a lot that I liked in the season. And I liked about half of the final 4-part arc. It's just, it did kind of, failed to stick the landing as far as I'm concerned. But still a lot of stuff that I enjoyed, some great returns that, seeing old faces. I think they did, a halfway decent job of wrapping up the Arrowverse, even though that wasn't their job. So overall, I'm going to give it a B+. Rewatchable, yeah, I mean, if you've got, a rainy weekend and you got nothing better to do, you could throw in this season of The Flash, and knock it off in a weekend. Are you going to feel the urge to do so? Maybe not, but, it would probably stand up to a second viewing. Jeff, how would you rate grade the season?
Are you sure you want me to go before Dimitri? Because I feel like we're going to end this on a dark note if we end it with Dimitri. I think I'm going to grade it higher, is what I'm trying to say.
I don't doubt that, but go ahead.
Okay. I'm assuming I'm going to grade it higher than Dimitri. I feel like, not to go all that so raven on you, Dimitri, I feel like you're probably going to give it at the highest in the C territory. So I will be higher than you, but actually not as high as the professor, interestingly enough. I'm going to give it a B-. And I really thought about this sort of long and hard after I watched the episode last night. And that's the grade that sort of came up in my mind, popped up, and it felt appropriate for me. Maybe some of the shoulda, coulda, woulda, has infected my brain of like what I would have liked to have seen versus what we got. But, I mean, if we're being fully honest, as wonderful as it was to see Javicia Leslie again, that first arc, The Red Death, was And then all the middle stuff was interesting. Like, we did get some really good character-based stuff from some of our favorite characters on this show, as well as from Supergirl. And then, like you said, Professor, half of this 4-part finale, which that's what the subtitle was for part 4, half of it was good, and then the middle half was okay. And even now, after seeing part 4 and like looking back, because this is one story told over 4 parts, I can see where maybe some stuff in the middle improved a little bit, but still, the middle wasn't as good as the beginning. But, I mean, let's be for real. I mean, the first one I think was the best one, and the last one was better than the middle too. But still. Yeah, B-. I'm trying to find an appropriate way to end this. So yeah, B- for me. It wasn't a phenomenal season. It wasn't the worst. It was okay.
Dimitri, how would you grade the season? Jeff has confidently predicted what you're going to do. Are you going to allow him to deprive you of your free will?
Yes.
Oddly enough, I've been unfairly profiled here because I was also aiming towards a B minus.
Ooh.
This season was the first season in a while where I was like, that episode was genuinely fun. That, gave me vibes of season one, season two. So, that hadn't happened in a while. And I do think there are a few episodes from this season that are worth, I think, as you say, Professor, a rainy day rewatch. Whereas, there's very little I would rewatch from like the Mirrorverse season or the Cicada season. So I do think, it failed to stick the landing in terms of, being the end of the Flash and sort of, all the weight of that. But it had like some pretty good moments, including, I think, this conceptualization of Cobalt Blue was interesting. I mean, it's different from the comics, but it was, an interesting twist that had a lot of weight for this show. So, I had a few good moments this season, and I enjoyed it. So, a lot of problems. I think you guys outlined those very well, but B minus.
It's almost time to say goodbye after 9 years. So, do either of you have anything else you want to discuss before we put the Flash to bed?
Final thoughts. I mean, this really is the end of an era. And, I got to give props to this show because however much hate we throw at it sometimes, this has been on for 9 years, 10 years actually, given the COVID break. The Arrowverse is, even older than that. Keeping something on air this long, took a lot of hard work from a lot of talented people. And, props to everybody who was involved in this show, whether we liked, some of the storylines or not, whether we liked some of the characters or not, it took a village to bring this to fruition. I'm going to give a special shout out to Candace Patton. I think, her casting made a lot of waves, angered a lot of racist fanboys in terms of, Iris West being reimagined as a black woman. But I think, she rose above all that with grace. And, given the amount of vitriol that was thrown her way, which is absolutely horrible, being there from episode 1, season 1, all the way to the series finale took guts and took dedication. And we're seeing, that ripple effect beyond the show now, where even the Flash movie is going to have Iris West being played by a black woman. So, this fun little show that, we've been watching, weeknights for a while, some big things were tackled here. And, it was fun to watch. It was fun to interact with. And I'm glad, it was a part of my life. I think, it's been fun to watch. It's been fun to interact with all the other fans, whether through the podcast or Twitter. And I'm glad we, some sort of community emerged from everything that was sort of thrown our way. Jeff, what about you?
Well, I want to say first off, just to echo what you're saying, I want to say thank you to the CW. Thank you to the Flash actors, to the writers,
Hell yeah.
BTS, everyone involved with this series. And in essence, I also want to extend that thank you to the greater Arrowverse, to the Arrowverse actors, writers, directors, BTS, VFX people, costuming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyone that was involved in this show, The Flash, or in any of the other shows in this broader universe, thank you, because we would not be sitting here podcasting for many, many, many years now if it wasn't for all of you. I want to single out 3 Flash actors. Not that, the rest, shouldn't get singled out, but for me personally, Grant Gustin as the Flash, as Barry Allen. I didn't always agree with you as a character, but I always agreed that Grant Gustin is Barry Allen. He is such a phenomenal actor that we've seen grow throughout these years. And I know that there's another actor out there, and I'm sure they might do a good job and that sort of thing. And there might be many more actors after that, but hashtag not my Flash. My Flash is Grant Gustin. and he has been phenomenal, period. I'm going to echo what you said, Dimitri. Candice Patton, for everything that she's gone through, from the cyberbullying to the racism, et cetera, et cetera. She has handled everything with such strength and grace. I have no idea how she does it. My hope is that she is in therapy, to deal with, just the craziness that she had to deal with.
Yes.
My hope is that she has some way to vent, someone to talk to, hopefully a professional, just because she went through a lot and she handled it so well and she survived it. And, she was absolutely phenomenal as Iris West, who soon became Iris West Allen. So she is another standout for me in the cast. And I gave him the MVP, but I'll give him extra kudos here. Jesse L. Martin just brought an incredible amount of gravitas as Papa Joe. Yeah, I can't imagine anybody else as Papa Joe. And all of those Papa Joe talks were just amazing and moments that I looked forward to each episode because Joe is just so good. Now, I also want to thank our previous co-hosts and moderators, not just here on The Flash, but or the Central City Citizen, as I should call it, but the rest of our Arrowverse podcasts as well, whether you've been with us or whether you were with us for a couple months, a season, or several seasons. I want to thank everyone that was involved with either this podcast or the other podcast for the time and the effort that they put into shaping this podcast, and as well as living in their truth. I mean, it is difficult sometimes for people to, state their opinion, live their truth, and stick with how they believe in whatever it is, whether it's a storyline or a character choice or anything like that. So I'm incredibly thankful for everyone, taking the time out, watching said show week to week, and then sitting at their computer or their phone or their tablet or whatever, and spending about an hour every time that there's a new episode to discuss their opinions about said episode. This series in particular has gone through a couple different iterations. We started off, I believe it was the Central City Report, because we were a spinoff of the Arrow podcast or the Arrow show, which was the Star City Report. Then we started to come into our own identity because there were other spinoffs. So we moved into, I believe it was the Central City Chronicle, and then we finally decided to have the actual in-show name of the Central City Citizen. We had a couple different moderators in the beginning. We've had a variety of different co-hosts, and I'm incredibly thankful to everyone that was involved in the show, but especially our current group. I want to thank you, Dimitri. I appreciate you standing in your truth. I appreciate your love-hate relationship that you have with this series. You've always strived and yearned for this series to be the best that it possibly could be, and I love that about you. I'm not going to lie, I enjoyed seeing you getting consistently dragged on Twitter by the Batwoman writers. That was a highlight of my life because it was
Shout out to the Batwoman writers, man. They got jokes, man.
Yes, they were just fantastic. I love how they interact with their fans. And let's be real, a lot of the Arrowverse people did interact with their fans, which was fantastic. A quick shout out to your paintings of Candice Patton, which I will never forget. And I got to give you mad respect, your unflinching love of Keiko. I love that you stood in your truth with that, including to the very end on this very final podcast. I love it. I also want to give a shout out to you, Professor X. I really am thankful to how you took the reign of this ship and you steered it in the direction that you did. I also can't forget your eerie predictions, like when you predicted that Laurel Lance would return on Arrow, or that Caramel was dead over on Supergirl. Your Canadian sass will never be forgotten. Your love of Christine Sinclair, your hatred of tidal waves and tanks. Tidal waves on Supergirl, tanks on Black Lightning, and your unflinching love of James Olsen's suit on Supergirl as well as your adoration, I would say slightly creepy adoration of good women turning bad. I have to thank you so much for being the moderator of this podcast for these past several seasons. And last but not least, the most important people that I'm thanking, to be quite honest, I want to thank you, the listeners, for listening to us week to week, whether you listen to us from the beginning, whether you listen to us recently, whether you're, by the magic of the internet, listening to us in the future. I thank you for taking the time to download, subscribe, like, share, whatever you've done. I'm appreciative of you because let's be for real, you have several options. You could be listening to anything, and the fact that you're listening to us either praise or bitch about this show or the rest of the Arrowverse, thank you for that. Your support has been incredible. We're all incredibly grateful to you, the listeners, and I know that I'm sounding a little bit like, things are ending. We do have other podcasts, shameless plug. We do cover the Marvel stuff on Disney+. We will more than likely be covering the DCU stuff on the streaming service that's currently called Max, the home of HBO. If you're listening to this in the future, it probably has a different name. So wherever the DC stuff is, we will probably be covering that as well. So stay tuned for that. You can always visit PoppyChuloRadio.com to get the latest and the greatest.
Thank you for having us, Jeff. It's been, it's this great, mammoth of podcasts that you've built under the Poppy Chulo umbrella, and I'm so thankful I got to be a part of it. Any sort of Arrowverse show that I watched didn't feel complete until I discussed it with you guys when we taped. So it's been a pleasure, man.
And it has been a pleasure having you as well these past couple of years. I mean, it's crazy to think that this Arrowverse, is over. We've been doing this for 9 full years. This is one of those very few shows, very few long-running shows where we have done every single season. And we did do all of the other Arrowverse shows. All the official canon Arrowverse shows. And, we do Superman and Lois, which is no longer Arrowverse, but it's Arrowverse adjacent. So the fact that all of them have ended, the Superman and Lois situation is still up in the air, but this series, The Flash, officially ends the Arrowverse. So it's a huge hole that, is now, that has been made, I should say. It's a huge hole that's been made in our podcasting network and schedule. So it's crazy to think how long we have been in total as a podcast been covering this series. So it's incredibly daunting. But, just to go back to how both of us sort of started saying our farewells, thank you to everybody involved with The Flash as well as the other shows. I'll name them, might as well. It's the last podcast. It was Arrow. It was Legends of Tomorrow. It was Supergirl. It was Black Lightning. It was Batwoman. A little bit Superman and Lois for a moment. Thank you to everyone involved because, once again, we would have had nothing to talk about. We would not have been chatting about these series for all these years if it wasn't for the creatives behind it.
For sure. And like you said, there may never be an era like this in, broadcast television again. I'm interested to see what comes out on streaming. I do think there are going to be some amazing offerings there, but this was a unique moment in television history. One that I think caught a lot of people by surprise because it hadn't happened before, and I don't think will happen on this scale again. But I'm glad, I'm glad we got to see it and got to be entertained by it. Got to be frustrated by it at times, but, that's all part of the journey.
I agree. So I guess, one final toast to the Arrowverse.
Farewell. Farewell, Central City. I hope for great things for, all the cast, crew, everybody involved. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for all of them in the pipeline.
I co-sign that as well.
On behalf of Jeff and Dimitri, I would like to thank everyone for joining us these past 13 episodes and these past 9 seasons. Here's our announcer one last time to remind you on how you can interact with us.
Follow Poppy Chulo Radio on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, @Poppy Chulo Radio. Do you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or concerns? Email us via contact@poppychularadio.com. Are you interested in joining the Poppy Chula Radio team as an on-air personality? Email talent@poppychularadio.com. Binge listen to your favorite Poppy Chula Radio programs by visiting poppychularadio.com/archives. You can also download tonight's broadcast and the rest of the series through Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Just search for The Central City Citizen and subscribe.
Thanks, announcer. My co-host, for the final time, please wish the listeners a good night. Jeff?
For the final time, good night, Central City. Good night, listeners. And remember to believe in the impossible.
Dimitri?
Good night, listeners. Thank you to everyone who's listened to the podcast. Thank you to Jeff for having me on, and the professor. Sometimes I enjoy talking to you, and all the fans. Whether it's listening to the podcast, doing the podcast, interacting with you guys on Twitter. It might seem like a silly, fun little show, but some big things were tackled here, and I'm glad so many of us fans were able to enjoy that together.
Thanks for tuning in. From all of us here at the Central City Citizen, we wish you a final good night.